Jennifer Morgan, 37, trembled as she stood in her mother's kitchen watching her daughter Lily cry in the corner. What should have been a joyous family celebration had turned into a nightmare of revelations. Her own mother, the woman she'd trusted her entire life, had been secretly undermining her parenting for years. But as Jennifer discovered the full extent of the betrayal, she never imagined that the revenge she'd take would tear apart 3 generations and reveal family secrets buried for decades. Before I dive into the full story that changed my family forever, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments below, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more shocking family revelations. Trust me, you'll want to stick around to see how karma finally caught up with my mother's betrayal and the justice that followed. Growing up in Ridgemont, Connecticut, I always believed we were the quintessential American family. My mother, Evelyn Morgan, was the neighborhood's beloved matriarch, president of the PTA church, volunteer coordinator, and the woman who brought homemade pies to every new family on the block. My father, Richard, was the steadfast provider, a respected attorney whose quiet dignity complemented my mother's social butterfly persona. From the outside, we were perfect. I remember how other mothers would tell me, "You're so lucky to have Evelyn as your mom," and I believed it. Every dance recital, every school play, every soccer game, she was there with her camera and proud smile. When I struggled with algebra in high school, she hired the best tutor. When my first boyfriend broke my heart at 16, she took me for a weekend spa getaway to heal. She seemed to know instinctively what I needed sometimes before I knew myself. Our home was the gathering place for holidays. Thanksgiving at the Morgans was an institution, with relatives driving from 3 states away to experience my mother's famous turkey and cornbread stuffing. Christmas was a winter wonderland of perfectly wrapped presents and homemade eggnog. Even our summer barbecues felt like something out of a magazine. Spread perfectly grilled steaks, color-coordinated table settings, and Mom's award-winning potato salad. When I met Daniel in college, bringing him home felt like the most natural thing in the world. Mom embraced him instantly, folding him into our family traditions as though he'd always belonged. "He's a keeper," she whispered to me after that first dinner. And she was right, though not in the way I expected. We married 2 years after graduation, with Mom orchestrating the perfect June wedding in the garden of our family home. The cracks began to show only after Lily was born. My beautiful daughter came into the world after 36 hours of labor, and I fell instantly, irrevocably in love. I'd never known a feeling like holding my newborn against my chest, promising her silently that I would protect her from all harm. Daniel's eyes shone with tears as he cradled her tiny form, his finger caught in her surprisingly strong grip. Mom was there too, of course. She arrived at the hospital with a suitcase full of hand-embroidered baby clothes and a camera to document every moment. "I'll stay as long as you need me," she announced, moving into our guest room the day we brought Lily home. What I thought would be a week of help turned into a month, and then 2. "Mom," I finally said one evening while Daniel was working late, "I think we're getting into a routine now. You should go home and rest." The flash of emotion across her face was so quick, I almost missed it. Disappointment, certainly, but something else too. Something that looked strangely like resentment. "Of course," she replied smoothly, the perfect mask sliding back into place. "Your father probably misses me terribly. But I'll come by tomorrow to check on my girls." And she did. Every day. Sometimes twice. She'd arrive unannounced, letting herself in with the emergency key we'd given her. "I brought some soup," she'd say. Or, "I thought you might need a break." Always helpful, always smiling, always there. When I decided to return to my job as a marketing executive after 6 months of maternity leave, Mom's response was measured. "If that's what you think is best," she said, her tone carefully neutral. "I suppose Lily will adjust to daycare eventually." The guilt was immediate and overwhelming, exactly as she'd intended. That night, I cried in Daniel's arms, questioning my decision, my ability to balance motherhood and career, my worthiness as a parent. "Maybe I should stay home longer," I whispered. "Jen," Daniel said gently, "you love your job, and you're an amazing mother. Don't let anyone make you feel otherwise, not even your mom." But doubts had been planted and they took root. I compromised by arranging a part-time schedule for my first month back, working 3 days in the office and 2 from home. And on those office days, it was Mom who volunteered to watch Lily. "Why pay strangers when family is available?" she reasoned. It seemed like the perfect solution. Lily would be with someone who loved her, I could ease back into work, and Mom got the grandma time she clearly craved. What I didn't realize then was that I'd handed over more than childcare. I'd given her access, influence, and control in ways that would take years to fully understand. As Lily grew from infant to toddler, the little differences began to accumulate. She'd return from a day with Grandma using phrases I'd never taught her. She developed food preferences that mirrored my mother's, not mine. When I'd suggest an activity, Lily would sometimes say, "But Grandma says that's not how we do it." "We need boundaries," Daniel insisted, after one particularly frustrating evening when Lily refused to follow our bedtime routine because Grandma lets me stay up until I'm tired. "She's just trying to help." I defended, though a part of me knew he was right. Mom raised me and I turned out okay. Daniel's response was telling. "Did you, though? Because sometimes I wonder if you even know who you are outside of what your mother wants you to be." His words stung because they contained a truth I wasn't ready to face. But the seeds of awareness had been planted, and they would eventually break through the carefully tended garden of family mythology my mother had cultivated for decades. The incident that finally forced me to confront reality happened on Lily's 4th birthday. I'd spent weeks planning a small but special celebration, a butterfly-themed party in our backyard with a handful of Lily's preschool friends. I'd ordered custom invitations, crafted tissue paper butterfly decorations by hand, and even practiced making a butterfly-shaped cake from a tutorial I found online. 3 days before the party, Mom called. "Jennifer, dear, I've been thinking about Lily's birthday," she began in that honey-sweet voice that usually preceded some form of interference. 4 is such an important age. "I've taken the liberty of booking the party room at Wildwood Country Club. They can do the whole package, catering, entertainment decorations. All you need to do is show up." I felt my carefully constructed plans crumbling. "Mom, I've already sent out invitations for Saturday at our house. Everything is planned." "Oh, that's no problem." I called the mothers from Lily's class and explained the change. They were all thrilled the country club has that wonderful splash pad the children love. "And this way you won't have to worry about the weather or cleaning up afterward." The familiar mixture of gratitude and resentment rose in my chest. On one hand, she'd taken over without consulting me. On the other, a professionally managed party at the exclusive country club would certainly be impressive. As always, my mother had placed me in a position where refusing her generosity would make me seem ungrateful or worse, petty. "That's really something, Mom," I managed, swallowing my frustration. But I was looking forward to hosting at our home. Lily and I made decorations together. "Well, bring them along. They can add a personal touch to the professional setup." Her dismissal of my efforts was so casual, so complete, that I felt invisible. "Trust me, Jennifer, this will be much better. I remember how stressed you were after that little Halloween gathering last year." The reference to my previous failure was deliberate, a reminder of the time I'd attempted to host a Halloween party that had ended with 2 overtired preschoolers having meltdowns and one child spilling grape juice on our cream-colored sofa. Mom had swooped in to save the day then, too, taking over games and snacks while shooting me meaningful glances that clearly communicated her assessment of my hosting abilities. When I hung up the phone, I found Daniel watching me from the doorway. "Let me guess," he said quietly. "Hurricane Evelyn has decided to upgrade Lily's party." The country club, I confirmed, my voice small. She already called the other parents. Daniel crossed the room and took my hands in his. Jen, this has to stop. This is our daughter, our home, our life. Your mother can't keep overriding your decisions. Deep down, I knew he was right, but the prospect of confronting Mom filled me with dread. It's just a party, I said weakly. And the country club will be nice. It's not just a party, Daniel insisted. It's about respect. It's about recognizing that you're Lily's mother, not Evelyn. This pattern has been going on since Lily was born, and it's getting worse. That night, I lay awake long after Daniel had fallen asleep, replaying years of similar incidents in my mind. The time Mom had Lily's hair cut in a pixie style the day before our family photo session, knowing I'd been growing it out for months. The Christmas she'd bought Lily the exact dollhouse I'd already purchased and hidden in our closet, presenting hers first, so mine became the redundant gift. The countless times she'd undermined our decisions about food, screen time, or discipline with her familiar refrain. Grandmas are allowed to spoil their grandchildren. By morning, I'd made a decision. I called my mother, and for perhaps the first time in my adult life, set a clear boundary. Mom, I appreciate the thought behind booking the country club, but we're going to stick with our original plans. Lily is excited about having her friends over to our house, and I've put a lot of work into making it special. The silence that followed was deafening. When Mom finally spoke, her voice had a brittle quality I'd rarely heard. I see. Well, if that's what you want, I've already paid the deposit, of course. Non-refundable. The guilt trip was expected, but I held firm. I'm sorry about the deposit. We can pay you back. But this is important to me, Mom. I need you to respect my decisions about Lily's celebrations. Of course, I respect you, Jennifer, she said, though her tone suggested otherwise. I just thought, given your busy schedule, you'd appreciate the help. But if you'd rather do everything yourself, that's your choice. After we hung up, I felt simultaneously lighter and heavier from having finally stood my ground, heavier from the knowledge that this small act of independence would come with consequences. The butterfly party was a success. Despite Mom's dire predictions of rain, the weather was perfect, and children's boredom. They had a wonderful time with the simple games and activities I'd planned. Mom attended, of course, her smile fixed, and her comments carefully modulated to sound supportive while subtly undermining. How clever of you to use paper plates, so practical. Or, the children seemed to be enjoying themselves even without the splash pad. But the real revelation came later that evening as we were cleaning up. Lily, tired but happy, was helping gather discarded wrapping paper when she suddenly asked, "Mommy, is Grandma mad at me?" "Of course not, sweetie," I assured her, kneeling down to her level. Why would you think that Lily's next words sent a chill through me? Because I told her I wanted a party at our house, not her club. She said it would make you sad because you're not good at parties like she is. But I said I like your parties better. The implications hit me like a physical blow. Mom hadn't just gone behind my back to the other parents, she tried to manipulate my 4-year-old daughter into pressuring me to accept her plans. And when that failed, she'd attempted to make Lily feel responsible for my supposed unhappiness. That night, after Lily was asleep, Daniel found me sitting at the kitchen table staring at old family photos I'd pulled from an album. "What's going on?" he asked, sliding into the chair beside me. "I'm trying to see if there were signs," I said, pointing to a photo of Mom holding me on my own 4th birthday, her smile radiant, her arm wrapped possessively around my shoulders. Was she always like this? Or did it start when Lily was born? Daniel studied the photos thoughtfully. "What did your dad say about all this when you were growing up?" The question startled me. Dad, he didn't really say much about anything. He worked a lot, and Mom managed the house, the social calendar me. So he deferred to her like you've been doing, Daniel observed. And what about your relationship with your grandparents? Your mom's parents, I realized with a strange jolt that I had very few memories of my maternal grandparents, despite the fact that they'd lived less than an hour away. They came for holidays sometimes, but Mom always said they were critical of her parenting, so she limited their access to me. The parallels were suddenly glaringly obvious. History was repeating itself, with me cast in my father's passive role and Lily potentially facing the same manipulation I'd experienced. I need to talk to my father. I decided, closing the photo album with a decisive snap. There's more to this story than I've been allowed to see. My father had always been the quiet counterpoint to my mother's vivacity. Where she commanded attention, he observed from the periphery. Where she insisted, he suggested. They seemed to balance each other perfectly, or so I'd always believed. But as I drove to their house the following Tuesday while Lily was at preschool, I wondered how much of that perception had been carefully constructed by my mother. Dad was alone when I arrived, Mom having left for her weekly bridge club meeting. I found him in his study, surrounded by the military history books that had been his passion since retirement. He seemed surprised by my unannounced visit, but welcomed me with a warm hug. "Dad," I began after we'd settled with coffee, "I need to talk to you about Mom." His expression shifted subtly, a wariness entering his eyes. "What about her? She's interfering with how Daniel and I are raising Lily, undermining our decisions, going behind my back, even trying to manipulate Lily against me." The words tumbled out, years of accumulated frustration, finally finding release. And I'm starting to think this isn't new behavior. Dad was silent for a long moment, staring into his coffee cup as if it might contain the right response. Finally, he looked up, his expression, a mixture of resignation and relief. "No," he said quietly, "it's not new." What followed was a conversation unlike any we'd ever shared, honest, raw, and revelatory. Dad spoke of his early marriage to my mother, how her need for control had seemed like charming enthusiasm at first. How after I was born, her focus had shifted entirely to molding me into her vision of the perfect daughter. "Your grandparents saw it," he admitted, "your mother's parents. They tried to intervene when you were about 3. Your grandmother Barbara told Evelyn she was being too controlling, not letting you develop your own personality. The fight was explosive." "I barely remember them," I said, trying to recall the faces of the grandparents who'd been such peripheral figures in my childhood. "That was deliberate," Dad confirmed. "After that confrontation, your mother limited their access to you, claimed they were trying to turn you against her. We'd visit a couple of times a year, holidays, mostly always on her terms. When they pushed back, she'd cancel plans last minute, claim you were sick, or had a special activity she couldn't reschedule. The parallels to my own situation were chilling. "Why didn't you stop her?" I asked, unable to keep the accusation from my voice. Dad's shoulders slumped. "I tried at first, but Evelyn is extraordinarily skilled at making her way seem like the only reasonable option. When I'd object, she'd either make me feel foolish for questioning her expertise as a mother or suggest I didn't care enough about your well-being. Eventually, it seemed easier to go along to keep the peace. The path of least resistance," I murmured, recognizing my own pattern. "Yes," he acknowledged, and I told myself it wasn't so bad. "You seemed happy enough." She was a dedicated mother, involved in everything you did, attentive to your needs. It was only as you got older that I realized what it had cost you. "What do you mean, independence?" "Confidence in your own decisions. The ability to define yourself outside of your mother's expectations." His gaze was direct now, unflinching. "By the time you were in high school, you'd call her before making any significant decision, what classes to take, what activities to join, who to befriend. Not because you wanted her input, but because you feared her disapproval." The accuracy of his assessment was uncomfortable. Even now, as a grown woman with my own family, I felt the reflexive urge to defend Mom, to explain away her behavior as well-intentioned if misguided. The conditioning ran deep. "There's something else you should know," Dad said, rising from his chair and crossing to a bookshelf. He removed several books to reveal a small wall safe I'd never noticed before. After entering the combination, he withdrew a yellowed envelope. "These are letters from your grandmother, Barbara. She wrote to you regularly after your mother restricted their visits. Evelyn intercepted them, of course. I found them when I was cleaning out her desk during her hip surgery recovery last year. With trembling hands, I accepted the envelope. Inside were dozens of cards and letters spanning years from my childhood through my college graduation. Birthday wishes, Christmas greetings, congratulations on accomplishments my grandparents had somehow kept track of despite their limited contact. And in each one, expressions of love and gentle encouragement to discover my own path, develop my own interests, trust my own instincts." "She died believing you'd received these," Dad said softly, "that you'd chosen not to respond." Tears blurred my vision as I read my grandmother's familiar yet unknown handwriting. One passage from a letter written when I was 16 stood out. "Remember, Jennifer, that love doesn't control or constrain. Real love makes space for you to grow into yourself, even when that self might be different from what was expected. Your grandfather and I may not see you often, but we're always holding that space for you." The weight of lost connection, of stolen relationships settled heavily on my chest. "Why are you showing me these now?" I asked Dad. "Because you're asking the questions I should have encouraged you to ask long ago," he replied, "and because I see history repeating itself with Lily. The difference is, you still have time to break the cycle." As I drove home, the letters safely stowed in my bag, I felt a strange mixture of grief and determination. Grief for the grandparents I'd never truly known for the relationship that had been systematically undermined. Determination not to let the same pattern continue with Lily. That evening, I shared everything with Daniel, the conversation with my father, the revelations about my grandparents, the hidden letters. He listened without interruption, his expression growing increasingly troubled. "What do we do now?" he asked when I'd finished. "We protect Lily," I said, a new resolve, strengthening my voice. "We set clear boundaries with my mother, and we enforce them consistently, no matter how uncomfortable it gets." Daniel took my hand, squeezing it gently. "It won't be easy. Your mother isn't going to surrender control without a fight." I know, I acknowledged, but I have something my father didn't when he faced this same challenge. "What's that?" The truth, I said simply. And the determination not to let another generation suffer from secrets and manipulation. What I couldn't know then was just how fierce that fight would become, or how far my mother would go to maintain her grip on our family narrative. 2 weeks after my conversation with Dad, we planned a family dinner at my parents' home. I'd been carefully documenting instances of Mom's interference since the birthday party revelation, building what Daniel jokingly called my case file. There was the time she'd taken Lily for ice cream after I'd explicitly said no treats before dinner. The educational tablet she'd given Lily loaded with apps we hadn't approved. The way she'd begun referring to their time together as real grandma days as opposed to the boring days with Daniel's mother, Patricia. Each incident alone seemed minor, easily dismissed as grandmotherly indulgence. Together, they formed a pattern of deliberate undermining that could no longer be ignored. It was time for a direct conversation. I arrived early as requested, bringing Lily with me while Daniel would join us later after his work meeting. Mom greeted us with her usual enthusiasm, sweeping Lily into a hug and presenting her with a small gift-wrapped package. Yet another boundary crossed as we'd agreed no presents outside of birthdays and Christmas to avoid. Spoiling. "What's the occasion?" I asked, keeping my tone light despite the familiar irritation rising within me. Does a grandmother need an occasion to treat her precious granddaughter? Mom countered, already helping Lily unwrap the gift, an expensive-looking bracelet with charms representing various milestones in Lily's life. Lily, sweetie, why don't you go find Grandpa? I think he's in the garden, I suggested, wanting a moment alone with Mom before dinner. Once Lily had skipped outside, I turned to my mother. Mom, we need to talk about boundaries. Her smile remained fixed, but her eyes cooled noticeably. Boundaries. That sounds rather formal for family, doesn't it? Nevertheless, I persisted. There are some patterns that need to change. Daniel and I are Lily's parents. We make the decisions about her upbringing, her diet, her activities, her gifts. We need you to respect that. Jennifer, darling, you're being absurdly dramatic, Mom said, turning toward the kitchen as if the conversation was already over. Everything I do is out of love for Lily and for you. If you'd rather I not be involved in my only granddaughter's life. It was the same tactic she'd always used, framing any criticism as a total rejection, forcing me to backpedal and reassure her. Not this time. That's not what I said, I stated, firmly following her into the kitchen. I want you involved in Lily's life. But involved doesn't mean overriding our parenting decisions or trying to make Lily prefer your way of doing things. Mom busied herself with dinner preparations, her movements sharp and precise. I have no idea what you're talking about. I think you do, I countered, taking a deep breath before continuing. Like telling Lily that I'm not good at parties to pressure her into wanting the country club celebration you'd planned. Her hands stilled momentarily before resuming their work. Children misunderstand things. Lily obviously confused something I said. Or the way you refer to time with you as real grandma days compared to boring days with Patricia. Or how you consistently undermine our rules about screen time snacks and bedtime routines. Mom turned to face me, her expression a careful mask of wounded innocence. I'm trying to give Lily special memories with her grandmother. Is that so terrible? My own mother was cold and critical. I've told you that. I'm simply trying to be the grandmother I wish I'd had. The mention of my grandmother, Barbara, sent a surge of anger through me. Actually, let's talk about your mother. I know what really happened, Mom. Dad showed me the letters. The color drained from her face. What letters? The ones Grandma Barbara wrote to me for years? The ones you intercepted and hid? The ones where she expressed love and support without any attempt to control or manipulate me? My voice shook with emotion I could no longer suppress. You didn't protect me from a cold, critical grandmother. You deliberately cut me off from grandparents who loved me and wanted a relationship with me. For a moment, Mom seemed genuinely speechless, her carefully constructed narrative crumbling before her eyes. Then her expression hardened. Your father had no right to show you those. He's never understood the complexity of my relationship with my mother. She constantly undermined my parenting, just like you're accusing me of doing now. Was she undermining you? Or was she trying to give me room to be myself instead of a mini version of you? I challenged. You have no idea what you're talking about, Mom snapped, abandoning the pretense of calm. I gave you everything, opportunities, guidance, structure. Without me, who knows what would have become of you? Your father certainly wasn't involved enough to shape your development. And that's exactly my point, I said. You didn't just guide me, Mom. You controlled me. Every decision, every friendship, every interest, all had to meet your approval. And now you're trying to do the same with Lily. The kitchen door swung open, and Lily bounded in, followed by my father. Mommy, Grandpa showed me the new bird feeder. There are so many birds. Her excitement faltered as she registered the tension in the room. Are you mad? No one's mad, sweetheart, Mom said, quickly shooting me a warning glance. We're just having a grown-up talk. Why don't you help me set the table for our special dinner? I watched as Lily eagerly took the stack of plates. Mom handed her, careful not to escalate the situation in front of my daughter. But this conversation was far from over. Dinner itself was a masterclass in passive aggression. Mom maintained her perfect hostess persona, serving Dad's favorite roast beef and regaling us with stories from her bridge club. To an outside observer, everything would have appeared normal. But beneath each pleasantry was a barb, each anecdote carefully chosen to emphasize her social standing and influence. When Daniel arrived halfway through the meal, he immediately sensed the undercurrents. His questioning glance met my subtle headshake later. Not here. After dinner, as Dad and Daniel cleared the table, Mom announced she had a surprise for Lily. I've prepared a special dessert, and then I thought we might look at some old photo albums. I found pictures from when your mommy was exactly your age, Lily. You look so much alike. The photo albums. Of course. Another of Mom's tactics, using carefully curated memories to reinforce her narrative of our perfect mother-daughter relationship, while simultaneously reminding me of all she had done for me over the years. The implied message, "You owe me your compliance." "Actually, we can't stay late tonight," I interjected. "Lily has school tomorrow, and we still need to do her reading practice before bed." But Jennifer Mom protested. "I've made her favorite chocolate pudding cake, and these photos are part of her heritage. Surely reading practice can wait one night?" I felt Daniel's supportive presence as he moved to stand beside me. "We really do need to stick to the routine," he affirmed. "But the cake sounds delicious." "Perhaps we could take some home for tomorrow." Mom's smile tightened. "It's really best served warm. And the photos could be looked at another time," I completed firmly. "Maybe this weekend, if you'd like to bring the albums to our house." The suggestion that she come to our territory rather than keeping us on hers clearly displeased her, but with both Daniel and I presenting a united front, Mom had little choice but to acquiesce. I suppose that would work. Though I've planned everything for tonight. "Plans change," I said simply. "Lily, go get your backpack, please. It's time to head home." As Lily ran off to collect her things, Mom drew me aside, her voice low and intense. "I don't know what's gotten into you lately, Jennifer. This new attitude is concerning. Perhaps you should talk to someone about these paranoid ideas you're developing." The suggestion that setting normal boundaries was somehow a sign of mental instability might have worked on me in the past. Now it only strengthened my resolve. "The only thing that's changed is my willingness to speak up," I replied evenly. "And if anyone needs to talk to someone, it's you about why you feel the need to control everyone around you, even at the cost of genuine connection." Her eyes widened in shock at my directness. Before she could respond, Lily returned backpack in hand, followed by Dad and Daniel from the kitchen. "Ready to go, pumpkin?" Daniel asked Lily deliberately, lightening the mood. "But what about Grandma's surprise?" Lily asked, looking confused. "Next time, sweetheart, I promised catching my father's eye over Lily's head." The small nod he gave me contained both approval and apology for not having shown this kind of backbone himself decades earlier. In the car on the way home, Daniel waited until Lily was engrossed in a book before asking quietly, "How bad was it before I arrived?" "Illuminating," I replied. She didn't deny anything. She just justified it all as being for my own good. And the next step, I stared out at the darkening evening, a plan already forming in my mind. We start setting consistent, non-negotiable boundaries. And when those inevitably don't work, we take more drastic measures. What I couldn't articulate even to Daniel was the growing certainty that my relationship with my mother had reached a breaking point. The woman who had shaped my entire existence had been exposed as a manipulator who had robbed me of authentic connections and autonomy. The anger simmering beneath my calm exterior would eventually demand satisfaction, a reckoning that would shake our family to its core. Hey everyone, I know we're at a crucial point in the story, but before we continue, I'd love to connect with you. If you're enjoying this family drama so far, please hit that like button to let me know. I'm curious, have you ever had to confront a controlling family member? The next part of the story takes an unexpected turn that I think will really resonate with many of you. Subscribe so you don't miss what happens next with Jennifer Lilly and the revenge that's brewing against a lifetime of manipulation. The weeks following our dinner confrontation settled into a tense detente. Mom maintained her usual frequency of calls and visits, but there was a new brittleness to her interactions. She'd comply with our stated boundaries while in our presence, but I'd find evidence of continued undermining in subtle ways, comments to Lily that I'd overhear small gifts slipped into my daughter's backpack with notes, emphasizing they were our special secret. Daniel urged patience, suggesting that changing decades-long patterns would take time. Dad remained supportive but distant, his lifetime habit of non-interference difficult to break. And I documented everything, building what was becoming less of a case file and more of an indictment. The situation came to a head on a rainy Tuesday in October. I'd had a particularly challenging day at work, a major marketing campaign launch derailed by last-minute client changes. When I arrived to pick up Lily from my parents' house, Mom had insisted on watching her after school, despite my suggestion that she go to her regular after-school program. I was already stretched thin. The scene that greeted me when I entered their home without knocking pushed me past my breaking point. Lily sat at the dining room table, surrounded by open workbooks and flashcards, tears streaming down her face as my mother stood over her with an expression of stern disappointment. "No, Lily, that's not correct. Try again," Mom was saying as I walked in. "You need to focus better." "What's going on here?" I demanded, rushing to Lily's side. My daughter threw herself into my arms, sobbing against my shoulder. "Jennifer, I didn't hear you come in," Mom said, quickly gathering the papers on the table. "Lily and I were just doing some extra academic work. She's struggling a bit with her reading comprehension, so I thought I'd help." I stroked Lily's hair, feeling her small body tremble against mine. "Lily, sweetie, go wait in the car for a minute, okay? I need to talk to Grandma." Once Lily had reluctantly detached herself and headed outside, I turned to my mother with cold fury. "Her teacher said nothing about reading comprehension issues at our conference last week. In fact, she's reading above grade level." Mom waved a dismissive hand. "Teachers today are so concerned with self-esteem that they sugarcoat everything. I've been an educator for decades, Jennifer. I know when a child needs additional support." "You were a high school English teacher 30 years ago," I corrected. "You have no training in early childhood education. And more importantly, you have no right to decide unilaterally that my child needs remediation. I'm simply trying to ensure she has every advantage." Mom insisted, her voice taking on the familiar patronizing tone that had silenced me countless times before. "When you were her age, I had you reading 2 grade levels ahead. The academic foundation I gave you is why you've been successful in your career." The comparison sparked something in me, a connection I hadn't fully made until that moment. "Is that what this is about? You're competing with me through Lily, trying to prove you're a better influence than I am?" Mom looked genuinely shocked at the accusation. "Don't be ridiculous. Everything I do is out of love for that child." "No," I said, the clarity of the moment crystallizing my thoughts. "It's about control. It's always been about control. You couldn't control your own mother, so you made sure to control me. And now you're trying to do the same with Lily." Mom's face paled, then flushed with anger. "You have no idea what you're talking about. My relationship with my mother is none of your business." "It became my business when you used it as justification for cutting me off from her," I countered. "And it's absolutely my business when you make my daughter cry because she can't meet your impossible standards." "Standards are what make people successful," Jennifer, Mom snapped, abandoning her usual carefully modulated tone. "Not everyone gets a trophy for participation in real life. Lily needs to learn that now." "She's 5 years old." The words exploded from me with a force that surprised us both. 5. And you're treating her like she's failed some critical life test because she's not performing at whatever arbitrary level you've decided is acceptable. I gathered Lily's belongings with shaking hands. This stops now. From this point forward, you will not have unsupervised time with Lily. If you want to see her, it will be with either me or Daniel present. Every time. Mom's expression shifted from anger to calculation. Don't be hasty, Jennifer. Your father and I provide a significant amount of your childcare. How will you manage without us? Your job is so demanding. And Daniel travels for work. Be reasonable. The implied threat that I couldn't manage motherhood and career without her was so familiar it almost worked. Almost. We'll manage just fine, I assured her coldly. In fact, it will probably be easier without having to constantly counteract your influence. As I turned to leave, Mom played her final card. If you do this, Jennifer, there will be consequences. Your father and I have been generous with our support, the down payment on your house, Lily's college fund, our financial contribution to your household. All of that could be reconsidered. The naked attempt at financial blackmail stunned me. Are you seriously threatening to withdraw financial support if I don't let you continue manipulating my child? I'm simply pointing out that family support goes both ways, she replied smoothly. We help you, you respect our role in Lily's life. In that moment, any remaining illusions I had about my mother's motivations shattered completely. Keep your money, I said quietly. We never asked for it, and we certainly won't be accepting it with these kinds of strings attached. I walked out to the car where Lily waited, her small face, still tear-streaked but calmer now. As I buckled her in, she looked at me with worried eyes. Is Grandma mad at me because I couldn't do the reading right? No, sweetie, I assured her, my heart breaking at the insecurity my mother had already managed to instill. Grandma isn't mad at you. And there's nothing wrong with your reading. You're doing perfectly well for your age. But Grandma said I need to work harder or I'll fall behind, Lily persisted. Grandma is wrong, I said firmly. Your teacher says you're doing great, and she's the expert on what kids your age should be able to do. As we drove home, I called Daniel and briefly explained what had happened. I need to pick up some things from the store, I concluded. Can you be home in 20 minutes to stay with Lily? Of course, he agreed immediately. Are you okay? No, I admitted, but I will be. I'm done letting her control our lives. After dropping Lily off with Daniel, I drove to the nearest office supply store with a plan forming in my mind. I purchased a voice-activated recording device, a new notebook for documentation, and a small fireproof lockbox. If my mother wanted a war over Lily's upbringing, I would arm myself with irrefutable evidence of her manipulations. The next day, I contacted our family lawyer to discuss options for legally protecting Lily from my mother's influence, including the possibility of a restraining order if things escalated further. I also enrolled Lily in the after-school program at her elementary school, eliminating the need for my parents' childcare assistance. When I called my father to explain the new arrangements, his response was telling. I understand, he said quietly. For what it's worth, Jennifer, I think you're doing the right thing. I just wish I'd had your courage 30 years ago. It's not too late for you, Dad, I suggested gently. You could still set boundaries of your own. His bitter laugh held decades of resignation. At my age, after nearly 40 years of marriage, I wouldn't even know where to begin. The sadness in his voice stayed with me long after we'd hung up. Was that my future, looking back with regret at a life defined by someone else's controlling influence? The thought strengthened my resolve to break the cycle once and for all. For 2 weeks, Mom kept her distance, a calculated silence designed to make me question my decision and eventually capitulate as I had so many times before. When that didn't work, the escalation began. First came the flying monkeys, mutual friends, and distant relatives suddenly concerned about my well-being, calling to check if everything was okay with your mother. Each conversation followed a similar pattern, expressions of concern. Subtle suggestions that I was being unreasonable reminders of all Mom had done for me over the years. Next came the more direct approach. Mom appeared at my office unannounced one afternoon, bearing Lily's favorite cookies and a brittle smile. "I thought we could talk woman to woman," she said, settling into the chair across from my desk as if I'd invited her. "This silly estrangement has gone on long enough. This isn't an estrangement," I corrected her. "It's a boundary. You can still see Lily, just not alone. Because you don't trust me with my own granddaughter," she said, her voice taking on the wounded tone that had been so effective in the past. "After everything I've done for both of you. This isn't about gratitude, Mom. It's about respect. You consistently undermine my parenting decisions and try to manipulate Lily's perceptions." She leaned forward, her expression earnest. "Jennifer, darling, I think you're under a great deal of stress. Your father mentioned you've been working long hours lately. Perhaps you should consider talking to someone professional about these paranoid thoughts you're having." The gaslighting was so blatant, it was almost comical. "My thoughts aren't paranoid, they're based on direct observation and evidence," I replied evenly. "And yes, I have been talking to a professional. She has a term for your behavior patterns: narcissistic control." Mom's face hardened instantly. "I see Daniel has been filling your head with psychology garbage. I always knew he resented my involvement in your family life." "Daniel has been nothing but patient and supportive," I countered. "This is my decision based on my experiences, both as your daughter and as Lily's mother." "Well," she said, rising abruptly, "when you come to your senses and realize what you're throwing away, you know where to find me. But don't expect things to simply go back to normal. There are consequences to accusations like the ones you're making." The implied threat hung in the air between us as she swept from my office, leaving the cookies behind like some strange peace offering. That evening, as Daniel and I discussed the confrontation, my phone buzzed with a text from my father. "Your mother is planning something. Be careful." She's been on the phone with her lawyer all afternoon. 3 days after my mother's office visit, the other shoe dropped with stunning force. I was in a client meeting when my assistant interrupted with an urgent message. Lily's school had been trying to reach me. There was a situation requiring my immediate attention. Heart pounding, I excused myself and called the school, imagining accidents, illness, any number of parental nightmares. The reality was far worse. "Mrs. Morgan, the principal, began cautiously. There was an incident at pickup time. Your mother arrived with documentation she claimed gave her the right to take Lily from school. When our staff questioned this, she became insistent. My blood ran cold. Please tell me Lily is still at school." "Yes, she's safe in my office," the principal assured me. "Our policy is clear. We don't release students to anyone not on the approved list without direct parental confirmation. Your mother had what appeared to be legal documents, but something seemed off about the situation, especially given Lily's reaction." "What do you mean, Lily's reaction?" I asked, already grabbing my purse and heading for the door. "She became visibly upset when she saw your mother saying she wasn't supposed to go with Grandma alone because it was against the rules now. That raised red flags for our staff. When they insisted on calling you first, your mother left rather abruptly. She said she'd be back with the police. I'm on my way," I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. "Please don't release Lily to anyone but me or my husband, regardless of what documentation they present." The 15-minute drive to Lily's school was the longest of my life. I called Daniel from the car and he promised to meet me there. Then I called my lawyer, explaining the situation in terse, panicked sentences. "This is serious," she confirmed. Attempting to remove a child from school under false pretenses could be considered attempted kidnapping. "Do you want to involve the police?" The question gave me pause. Despite everything, the thought of my mother being arrested was difficult to contemplate. Let me see what happened first, what documents she presented. Then I'll decide. At the school, I found Lily sitting in the principal's office, coloring quietly but with a tense vigilance that no 5-year-old should have to maintain. She flew into my arms when she saw me burying her face against my neck. "Mommy, Grandma said I had to go with her for a special trip, but I remembered what you said about not going alone with her, and I told the teacher." "You did exactly right," I assured her, holding her tightly. "I'm so proud of you for remembering." The principal handed me a copy of the document my mother had presented, a crudely altered version of our old childcare authorization form with additional language inserted, claiming broad rights to take Lily from school and other locations. It wasn't even a convincing forgery. She claimed this was a legal custody document. The principal explained her expression grave. "When our secretary questioned it, your mother became quite aggressive, insisting we had no right to keep her from her granddaughter." Daniel arrived as we were reviewing the document, his face tight with concern and anger. After assuring himself that Lily was unharmed, he examined the paper with disbelief. "She actually thought this would work. I think she counted on authority and intimidation," I said. "It's worked for her in the past." My lawyer, who had arrived shortly after Daniel, was more blunt in her assessment. "This is a clear attempt at custodial interference using forged documents. You have grounds for a restraining order at minimum, possibly criminal charges." While Daniel took Lily to the waiting area, the 4 of us, me, my lawyer, the principal, and the school's security officer discussed next steps. We agreed to file an incident report and implement extra security measures around Lily's school attendance and dismissal. "What about pressing charges?" the security officer asked. I hesitated, torn between protecting Lily and the ingrained reluctance to take action against my mother. "I need to think about that." We were just concluding the meeting when my phone rang my father, his voice tight with panic. "Jennifer, where are you? Is Lily with you? We're at the school." Mom tried to take her using fake documents. "Thank God you got there in time," he said, relief evident in his tone. "Jennifer, there's more you need to know. I found something disturbing. Your mother has been meeting with a lawyer who specializes in grandparents' rights. There are documents here, petitions for visitation rights, even custody claims based on parental unfitness." The room seemed to tilt around me. "What are you saying? She's building a case against you," and Daniel Dad explained, his voice breaking. "She's gathered evidence of neglect, photos taken out of context, recordings of Lily when she was upset about something. Statements from people in her social circle claiming they've witnessed concerning behavior. It's all fabricated or manipulated, but it's comprehensive." I sank into a chair, my legs suddenly unable to support me. "She's trying to take Lily from us." "Yes," Dad confirmed. "And Jennifer, she's been planning this for months. Since before your confrontation. Some of these notes and records go back nearly a year." The betrayal was so profound, so complete, that for a moment I couldn't breathe. Not just an impulsive reaction to being denied access, but a calculated long-term strategy to legally separate me from my child. "Where is she now?" I managed to ask. "She left about 20 minutes ago. Said she was going to fix things once and for all." "Dad, I need you to gather those documents and bring them to us." "All of them." And I hesitated, knowing what I was about to say would change our family forever. "I think you should stay somewhere else tonight. This is going to get ugly." After ending the call, I shared what I'd learned with Daniel and my lawyer. The principal and security officer exchanged alarmed glances. "In light of this information, I strongly recommend involving the police immediately," my lawyer advised. "This goes beyond a family disagreement. Your mother has demonstrated both intent and willingness to separate you from your child through deceptive and potentially illegal means." The decision crystallized with sudden clarity. "Yes," I agreed. "Let's call them now." What followed was a blur of police reports, statements, and protective measures. An officer was dispatched to our home in case my mother appeared there. My father arrived at the school with a briefcase full of damning evidence. My mother's meticulous documentation of her planned legal attack, including scripted testimony from her friends, manipulated photographs, and detailed strategies for portraying me as mentally unstable and Daniel as negligent. I had no idea it went this far, Dad said, looking decades older than he had just days before. I knew she was controlling, but this is something else entirely. As we were leaving the school under police escort, my phone rang again, a number I didn't recognize. With a sense of dread, I answered. Jennifer Morgan, a formal voice inquired. This is Officer Ramirez with Child Protective Services. We've received a concerning report about your daughter Lily's welfare that requires immediate investigation. The bottom dropped out of my world. Let me guess. I said, my voice eerily calm despite the panic coursing through me. The report was filed by Evelyn Morgan. The slight pause confirmed my suspicion. I'm not at liberty to disclose the reporting party, the officer said carefully. But we're required to investigate all claims of potential child endangerment. Officer Ramirez, I said I'm currently at my daughter's school with the police, my lawyer, and my husband, filing reports about my mother's attempt to remove my child from school using forged documents today. We have evidence she's been building a false case against me and my husband in an attempt to gain custody of our daughter. Now, the pause was longer. I see, she finally said. That adds important context to this situation. Where will you be for the next hour? I think it would be best if I met with you in person to sort this out. By the time Officer Ramirez arrived at our lawyer's office, where we'd relocated for privacy, the full scope of my mother's plan had become clear. The CPS report she'd filed alleged that I was mentally unstable, neglecting Lily's educational needs, and that Daniel was frequently absent and uninvolved. She'd included statements from her friends, claiming to have witnessed concerning behavior, along with strategically edited photographs and video clips taken during normal childhood moments of frustration or disappointment, presented as evidence of ongoing distress. I've been doing this job for 15 years, Officer Ramirez said, after reviewing both the CPS report and the evidence of my mother's broader scheme, and I can tell you this is one of the most calculated attempts at manipulation of the system I've ever seen. What happens now? Daniel asked, his arm protective around my shoulders. First, I'll be closing this CPS case as unfounded, Officer Ramirez stated firmly. Based on the evidence you've provided and the circumstances surrounding the report, it's clear this was filed maliciously. Second, I'd strongly recommend you pursue that restraining order immediately. This level of behavior typically escalates before it improves. As we were finishing the meeting, my phone lit up with my mother's number. I showed it to the room. You might want to put that on speaker, my lawyer suggested, with witnesses present. I answered the call, placing the phone on the conference table. Hello, Mom. Jennifer, this ridiculous situation has gone on long enough. She began without preamble, her voice sharp with anger. I'm on my way to your house now. We need to talk about Lily's future and your increasingly erratic behavior. I'm not at home, Mom, and neither is Lily. Then where are you? This game of keep away is childish and harmful to Lily. She needs stability, which you're clearly unable to provide given your mental state. Officer Ramirez raised her eyebrows at the blatant attempt at gaslighting. I'm with my lawyer, the police, and CPS, I informed her calmly. We're reviewing the false report you filed along with evidence of your attempted kidnapping and your documented plan to fraudulently obtain custody of Lily. The silence that followed was deafening. When Mom finally spoke, her voice had lost its commanding edge. I don't know what you think you're doing, Jennifer, but you'll regret this. Families deal with their problems privately, not when those problems include forged documents and false allegations. I countered. Not when they include attempts to separate a child from her parents through fraud and manipulation. Everything I've done has been for Lily's welfare, she insisted, desperation creeping into her tone. You're turning into your grandmother cold, judgmental, putting your own needs before your child's. I won't let you damage Lily the way my mother tried to damage you. The psychological projection was so perfect, it would have been fascinating if it weren't so destructive. Mom, I need you to listen carefully, I said, keeping my voice steady. You are not to contact me, Daniel, or Lily again. Not directly, not through intermediaries. We'll be filing for a restraining order today, and if you violate it, you will be arrested. You can't do this, she breathed, disbelief evident in her voice. I'm your mother. Yes, I agreed, sadly. You are! And that makes this betrayal all the worse. I ended the call looking around at the room full of witnesses to the final fracturing of my relationship with my mother. The silence was heavy with the weight of what had just occurred. Well, my lawyer said, finally, I think we have everything we need for that restraining order. The temporary restraining order was granted immediately. In the hearing for the permanent order 2 weeks later, my mother appeared with her own attorney, her appearance immaculate as always, but with a brittleness I'd never seen before. She maintained her composure as the judge reviewed the evidence, the forged documents, the false CPS report, the documented plan to separate me from Lily through legal manipulation. When given the opportunity to speak, she portrayed herself as a concerned grandmother, desperately trying to protect her granddaughter from inadequate parenting. My daughter has always been emotionally fragile, she told the court with practiced sincerity. Since Lily's birth, she's displayed increasing signs of instability. Everything I've done has been out of concern for my granddaughter's welfare. But the evidence told a different story. The judge, a stern-faced woman in her 60s, was particularly troubled by the altered documents and the false CPS report. Mrs. Morgan, she addressed my mother directly. The court takes a very dim view of attempts to manipulate the legal system, particularly when those attempts could result in unnecessary trauma to a child. The permanent restraining order was granted, prohibiting my mother from coming within 500 feet of me, Daniel, Lily, our home, or Lily's school for a period of 3 years. Additionally, the judge recommended that the district attorney review the case for potential criminal charges related to the forged documents and false report. As we left the courthouse, I caught a glimpse of my mother's face. The mask of control finally cracked to reveal a mixture of rage and disbelief. For perhaps the first time in her life, she'd been held accountable for her actions, and she had no idea how to process that reality. My father, who had attended the hearing separately, approached us in the corridor. I'm sorry, he said simply, his eyes red-rimmed from what must have been many sleepless nights. I should have protected you from this long ago. You can't change the past, Dad, I told him gently. But you can be part of our future if you're willing to respect our boundaries. I am, he promised. And Jennifer, I've filed for divorce. I can't be part of this anymore. Your confrontation gave me the courage to finally stand up for myself, too. The news surprised me less than it might have once. Where will you go? I've rented an apartment for now, he said, and I've been talking to your grandmother's sister, my Aunt Ellen. She's invited me to visit. Said she has stories about your grandparents that I should hear, that you should hear too when you're ready. In the months that followed, we began the slow process of healing and rebuilding. Lily started seeing a child therapist to help process the confusion and anxiety created by my mother's behavior. Daniel and I attended family therapy, working through the impact of generational trauma on our parenting and relationship patterns. My father, freed from decades of emotional subjugation, began to rediscover himself. He joined a community theater group, something my mother had always dismissed as frivolous. He traveled to visit family members who had been kept at a distance during his marriage. And slowly he rebuilt his relationship with me and Lily on healthier terms. The criminal investigation into my mother's actions resulted in charges of filing a false report and attempted custodial interference. Rather than face a public trial, she accepted a plea deal that included probation, community service, and mandatory counseling. The woman who had always prioritized her public image above all else now found that image irrevocably tarnished as news of the case spread through our community. Former friends distanced themselves, organizations requested her resignation from leadership positions, and the carefully constructed social standing she'd spent decades building crumbled around her. The ultimate punishment for a narcissist's loss of reputation and control had finally caught up with her. 1 year after the restraining order was granted, I received a letter from my mother's therapist. With my permission, the therapist facilitated a written apology, not asking for reconciliation, but acknowledging the harm done and the boundaries violated. Whether it represented genuine growth or simply a strategic move toward eventual access remained unclear, but the acknowledgement itself was something I'd never thought possible. Lily, now 6 and thriving in 1st grade, gradually stopped asking when she would see Grandma again. The nightmares decreased, and the anxiety that had manifested after the school incident slowly faded. Children are remarkably resilient when provided with stability, honesty, and unconditional love, all the things my mother had claimed to provide but had actually undermined. On a warm spring afternoon, as Lily and I planted flowers in our garden, she asked unexpectedly, "Mommy, why did Grandma try to take me away?" I paused soil, still clinging to my fingers, considering how to answer truthfully while respecting her. Age and understanding. Grandma has a hard time letting people make their own choices, I explained carefully. She thought she knew what was best for you, even better than Daddy and I do. Lily considered this, her small face serious. But you're my mom and dad. Yes, we are, and we'll always put what's truly best for you first, even when that means letting you make your own choices and become your own person. Like picking my own clothes, she asked, referencing our morning negotiation over her mismatched outfit. I smiled, brushing a smudge of dirt from her cheek. Exactly like that. Sometimes being a good parent means letting you be you, not who we want you to be. As she returned to enthusiastically patting soil around a marigold, I reflected on how the cycle of control and manipulation that had defined generations of my family had finally been broken. The price had been high, relationships destroyed, trust shattered, innocence compromised, but from those painful fractures, something healthier was beginning to grow. That evening, as Daniel and I watched Lily sleeping peacefully, I shared a realization that had been forming in my mind for months. You know, in a strange way, I'm grateful for what happened. Grateful, he asked, surprised. Not for the pain or the betrayal, I clarified, but for the clarity. If Mom hadn't escalated so dramatically, I might have continued the pattern of partial boundaries and eventual capitulation that's defined our relationship my whole life. Lily might have grown up experiencing the same subtle undermining I did, but now the cycle is broken. Daniel squeezed my hand gently. From family secrets to family healing. Exactly, I agreed. And Lily will grow up knowing that love doesn't control or diminish, it supports and expands. The scars would remain, of course. Trust once broken is never quite the same. But in breaking free from the patterns of the past, we had created space for something new to flourish. A family defined not by control and secrets, but by authenticity, respect, and the freedom to become our truest selves. Thank you for staying with me through this family journey. If you've experienced similar family dynamics or had to set difficult boundaries with loved ones, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Has karma or justice played a role in your family story? Don't forget to like this video if it resonated with you, subscribe for more real-life family drama stories, and share with someone who might need to hear that setting. Boundaries is an act of self-love. Remember, sometimes the most painful endings make way for the healthiest beginnings. I'm grateful for this community where we can learn from each other's experiences.